So, Game of Thrones. The final season of Game of Thrones has come and gone, and let's just say the reactions from fans have not been kind. Although, I might be in the minority for feeling that Season 8 isn't as bad as the internet would have you believe. Just the mere continuations of problems that began to emerge in the previous seasons. I can say for certain that its incredibly rushed nature has left me feeling disappointed. However, I feel as the years pass and the show's final season is reflected on, it actually may gain a more positive consensus.
This is awesome.
As there are certain character beats that have been done reasonably well. By this, I mean the events, actions and choices that make up the arc for the character's overall development. Also, there is no guarantee that the book's ending will be even better, although I doubt it, as George seems to have the foundation for a satisfying ending in place. But for the moment, that ending is all we got, so let's focus on the positive.
That will improve.
I'm sure it will.
One character I think that has survived its rocky last season with a satisfying character arc intact was, going by the name of the video you've probably guessed, JaIme Lannister. Despite the amazing world the show has brought to life, I believe it's the characters that will make this story stand the test of time. In particular, I think that the show's characterization of Jamie might be a testament to that. I've been following the show since its inception before falling off at around season 2 and coming back around season 4 and 5. And watching Jamie change as a character was one of the main driving forces that kept me coming back to the show. Now that his story has come to an end, I want to reflect on what made Jamie not just a great character, but possibly the most human one. By that I mean he might be just the most empathetic character that any piece of media has ever portrayed. Before we go any further, it's important to note that everything I talk about in this video refers to the show's version of Jamie. The books are their own entity, and from what I've dabbled in with the books, I'm pretty sure that Jamie's characterization differs from the show. So everything I point to refers to show Jamie, not book Jamie. Are we all clear on that? Good. Now, how did George and in turn the showrunners achieve this? While it isn't hard to see that Jamie changes as a character over the course of the show, the true extent of this may not be that simple to determine, as it could be suggested that his perceived growth throughout the show is just more down to the fact that we, as an audience member, are just viewing him from a different perspective. Let me explain. When Jamie is introduced all the way back in the opening episode of the first season, Winter is Coming, his first moments of screen time is he and his sister Cersei insinuating that they have conspired against the king.
He told the king both our heads were skewered in the city gates by now.
After that, he's immediately presented as the antagonist. Characteristics and traits such as his extravagant appearance, arrogant demeanour, and the bragging of his superior sword fighting skills illustrate this.
There are 3 men in the kingdoms who might have a chance against me. You're not one of them.
An example of his arrogance would be when he blocks Ned's path to inquire condescendingly about the possibility of them competing against each other at a tournament. Clearly this guy has an ego.
Would be good to have you in the field. The competition has become a bit stale.
Along with the rest of his family. Not to mention the nickname Kingslayer paints him as a dishonourable person.
Get in here, Kingslayer!
Then comes one irredeemable action after another. First, he's sleeping with his sister and has fathered her bastard children. Then he attempts to kill Bran by pushing him out a window for catching them in the act.
The things I do for love.
Jamie would go on to attack Ned and kill his own distant cousin Alton Lannister when he's captured by Robb, thus he can escape, only then to be soon recaptured. Before Joffrey took his true form as the Tyrant King, and the Bolton kinda showed their true colours, Jamie was the closest thing really to a main villain the show had.
You fight for the Starks, I fight for the Lannisters. Swords, lances, teeth, nails, choose your weapons. And let's end this here and now.
So now the question becomes, how can Jamie be seen as anything more than monstrous? Well, there's a couple of tricks that the show does, but for now let's focus in on the most basic trick, changing focus. Perspective is everything, and the best writers understand that the characters are just humans who sometimes follow their emotions, no matter how illogical it may seem. No one person is a bad person in their own eyes.
I'm trying real hard to be the shepherd.
So how does the show use this change of focus to make Jamie more empathetic? Well, let's look at the scene where Ned confronts Jamie for killing the Mad King.
was very brave, your brother, and your father too. They didn't deserve to die like that. Nobody deserves to die like that.
But you just stood there and watched.
500 men just stood there and watched. All the great knights of the Seven Kingdoms. You think anyone said a word, lifted a finger? No, Lord Stark. 500 men, and this room was silent as a crypt. Except for the screams, of course. And the Mad King laughing. And later, when I watched the Mad King die, I remembered him laughing as your father burned. It felt like justice.
Is that what you tell yourself at night? You're a servant of justice. That you were avenging my father when you shoved your sword in Aerys Targaryen's back.
Tell me, if I stabbed the Mad King in the belly instead of the back, would you admire me more?
You served him well. When serving was safe.
He even gets taunted later by King Robert for his actions.
What about Aerys Targaryen? What did the Mad King say when you stabbed him in the back? I never asked. Did he call you a traitor? Did he plead for a reprieve?
He said the same thing he'd been saying for hours. Burn them all.
So, Jaime's basically made out to be an opportunist and a dishonourable man. But that last line alludes us to the possibility that there might be more to the story. We finally get to hear Jaime's version of events later on in Season 3 when he's in the bat with Brienne.
So, we opened the gates and my father sacked the city. Once again, I came to the king, begging him to surrender. He told me to bring him my father's head. Then he turned to his pyromancer. Burn them all, he said. Burn them in their homes, burn them in their beds. Tell me if your precious Renly commanded you to kill your own father and stand by while thousands of men, women, and children burned alive, would you have done it? Would you have kept your oath then? First, I killed the pyromancer, and then, when the king turned to flee, I drove my sword into his back. Burn them all, he kept saying. Burn them all. I don't think he expected to die. He meant to burn with the rest of us and rise again. Reborn as a dragon, turn his enemies to ash. I slit his throat to make sure that didn't happen. That's where Ned Stark found me.
If this is true, why didn't you tell anyone? Why didn't you tell Lord Stark?
Stark? You think the Honorable Ned Stark wanted to hear my side? He judged me guilty the moment he set eyes on me.
So, just by showing Jaime's perspective, we suddenly have a lot more empathy for him. But even before this scene, the show has been slowly placing Jaime in a more favourable light. He makes a deal with Catelyn to get her daughters back, a deal he does his best to uphold. He also prevents Brienne of Tarth from being raped.
But only if she's alive. Her honour undismerged.
Lastly, another great trick which the show is so good at is defining a character by one singular attribute that they derive their whole purpose from, to then just suddenly take it away. be it Ned's honour being stripped away before he's beheaded, Bran's climbing only to be crippled, Theon Greyjoy's ideals for masculinity and manhood only to end up being castrated. When it comes to Jaime, sword fighting was what he was most famous for, and this is taken away when Locke cuts off his hand.
Yeah, this should help you remember.
This leaves him somewhat in mourning for one part of his livelihood. Him being ridiculed and his pathetic attempts to fight back help us feel more sympathy towards him. However, coinciding with this is one of the character's biggest moments of growth. This is the scene where Jaime selflessly saves Brienne from a bear, and in doing so puts himself in harm's way. In turn, this shows to the audience that he has the ability to care for someone other than just his family. This is a huge piece of character development for Jaime, as now without his hand he must literally redefine himself as a character.
Forge.
You lost your hand.
My sword hand. I was that hand.
Nonetheless, most of what makes Jaime empathetic was there from the very beginning. He pushed Bran to protect his children from being murdered by the king. He attacks Ned due to Catelyn capturing his brother, and when a Lannister guardsman stabs Ned through the leg, he lets Ned live and go free because he doesn't think that's a fair victory.
Why is he still alive?
It wouldn't have been clean.
His ego can now be seen as him being prideful and unwilling to let labels define him. This is what I meant by saying that it's hard to say how much he changes or grows, as a lot of his positive character traits were just laying below the surface, just waiting to be revealed.
How many men have you killed, my lord?
I don't know.
50? 100? Countless.
Countless has a nice ring to it.
And how many lives have you saved?
500,000. The population of King's Landing.
So, Jaime's a very empathetic character, but what exactly do I mean when I say he's the most human character? Well, to understand what I mean by human, let's look at another fantasy epic in the same vein, that being The Lord of the Rings, and the character of Boromir. In the film adaptation of the book, Boromir, unlike the other characters in the Fellowship, isn't as tempered or portrayed to be an idealized figure. All I mean by that is, he isn't as morally pure or as righteous as, for example, Aragorn, Gimli, Legolas or Gandalf, who are incredibly faultless throughout the films. Boromir lies somewhere below those ideals, just like most people. Boromir can be rash, illogical and mournful, but the key point is that his emotions governs his actions despite him knowing better.
Even now, there is hope left. But I cannot see it. It is long since we had any hope.
We see this when he wants to use the ring's power to defend his home and his people, despite knowing about its corrupting nature.
Why not use this ring? Long has my father, the steward of Gondor, kept the forces of Mordor at bay. By the blood of our people are your lands kept safe. Give Gondor the weapon of the enemy. Let us use it against him.
He seems upset after Gandalf's death and gives the hobbits a moment to mourn.
Give them a moment, for pity's sake.
By nightfall, these hills will be swarming with orcs. We must reach the woods of Lothlorien. Boromir.
He makes mistakes and shows true regret after trying to steal the ring from Frodo. In his final actions, Boromir tries to overcome his faults, dying defending the other hobbits. His last words are admitting his failings as a protector, but more so as a person.
I let Frodo go. Then you did what I could not. I tried to take the ring from him.
The ring is beyond our reach now.
Forgive me. I did not see. I have failed you all.
No, Boromir. You fought bravely. You have kept your honor.
This is what makes Boromir a human character, believing in ideals but never able to truly reach them, a slave to weakness and temptation. The ring could be the personification of sin, with Boromir as the only character in the whole franchise to overcome his. Boromir has the excuse of the debasing nature of the ring. Jamie, on the other hand, has a similar insidious force governing his actions that manipulate him into committing deplorable actions. What's this sinister force? Well, it's true love. Jamie is split down the middle as a person. He's made up of two core elements that are attached to his character. One is obvious, his love for Cersei. Another is his attempt to redeem himself by casting away his reputation and starting anew, summed up beautifully in this scene.
4 pages for Sir Duncan. He must have been quite a man.
So they say.
Sir Jamie Lannister. Someone forgot to write down all your great deeds.
There's still time.
Is there? For a 40-year-old knight with one hand?
Most of Game of Thrones is a rejection of antiquated ideas, especially within the fantasy setting. Jaime's character is the rejection of the trope that love is a redeeming force. In many love stories, especially in the genre of fantasy, love is portrayed as the one quality that can save the character from their own destruction, or as the force that leads to true happiness. Jaime's character discards that ideal by showing the opposite. Jaime suffers for love. Every action he performs for Cersei he agonizes over, as he knows it's wrong.
What do you choose?
Yes, I'd like to get back to you. To endure all that only to find you.
I choose you.
It's true that characters in other pieces of fiction also suffer for love, but in the end it saves or redeems them. Despite how vile and manipulating Cersei is to Jaime, love is still seen as the overwhelming powerful force as it is in other media. The difference being that for Jaime, it's used as an abusive and crippling force. Jaime's arc comes to a head at the end of the 7th season, where the second part of his character, the one that wants to redeem himself by overcoming Cersei, seizes self-control in order to rise above and face judgment.
I don't believe you.
In Season 8, he faces that judgment and takes responsibility by accepting the consequences of his actions.
I'm sorry for what I did to you.
You weren't sorry then. You were protecting your family.
He still continues to honour his pledge to help the living. Jamie Lee truthfully becomes the man he's always envisioned himself as, and finally sets the record straight, fighting alongside the heroes of the show. Jaime is lastly given his chance to finalise his character arc throughout the entire show by being offered a glimpse of a new life with Brienne, but to the surprise of many fans of the show, he rejects it.
You think I'm a good man? I pushed a boy out a tower window, crippled him for life, for Cersei. I strangled my cousin with my own hands, just to get back to Cersei. I would have murdered every man, woman, and child in Riverrun for Cersei. She's hateful. And so am I.
It is clear that Jaime is still crippled by his vice, so he returns to Cersei. He battles his way to the Red Keep and gets mortally wounded by Euron Greyjoy. By the way, Jaime being fatally wounded by the man who is cheating on him with his sister, I think the symbolism is obvious, aka the idea that his sister cheating would literally wound him. Jaime, in his final actions, tries to save his sister, and when that is no longer an option, he embraces her and consoles her, stating,
"Nothing else matters. Nothing else matters. Only us.
When the Red Keep collapses, they die in each other's arms. Jaime's death was probably the most appropriate ending for his character. All the bad choices he's made literally came crashing down upon him. A key point though is that Cersei and Jaime was true love, for better or for worse, which calls into question that love as the great redeemer as it's always portrayed to be. Jaime is not an idealized figure, nor is he morally pure and righteous. He's just a man. He's a man with human weakness, and because of that he can teach us a very human lesson. A man who made a lot of bad choices, but never let those choices define him. A man who overcame his flaws but couldn't overcome them all. A slave to temptation and love. Finally, and maybe most importantly, that we can't rewrite history, but maybe we can rewrite ourselves.
Anyway, it wouldn't have explained anything. I don't think any word can explain a man's life.